Michelle, we are so honored to have you with us tonight at the Western Women's Summit. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Malkin.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're the right Michelles. It is such a pleasure to be here with you, and I know some of you traveled quite a while to get here, fighting through hail and rain and whatnot, and I would have not have missed this for the world, and the timing couldn't have been better. The last couple of days have been an amazing victory, I think, for conservative women. Because I think over the last 4 years, the right has learned to seize the political narrative back from the Alinskyite storytellers who have basically had a monopoly on setting the narratives and perpetuating false political narratives in the public square and in public discourse. And I think that there's been a confluence and a synergy between a lot of old school institutions of the right, talk radio, conservative political commentators who have fought these battles for a long time, decades now, with a new generation of young conservative activists, women, young women like the women in this room, whose mere existence on college campuses drives the left nuts. Yes. The mere act of standing up and testifying and being proud to come out of the closet and say, I'm a conservative woman and deal with it. Now that is feminist empowerment. And they hate it. Look at this woman, Hillary Rosen. She goes on CNN and thinks that she can get away with disparaging not just Ann Romney. It's not about Ann Romney. It's not about any single public figure or politician's wife. It's about all of us. When she attacks conservative women who exercise their own free will, who come to their own independent conclusions about the best way to arrange their lives, their marriages, their careers, the best system for our politics and for our economy. She's attacking each and every one of us. And it is war. It is war. I mean, there are many kinds of foot soldiers that are needed to protect America. And God bless any of you who are veterans or who have served in uniform. We need them overseas and on the front lines. But we have to women have to wage a different kind of war in the domestic space. Because for too long, the Gloria Steinems and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Debbie Wasserman Schultzes and this entire coven of femagogues, that's what I call them, femagogues. You know, the funny thing is there's rarely anything femme about these femagogues. You notice that? Oh, and I've had to deal with them. A couple of years ago when I was on a book tour for Culture of Corruption, I went into the den known as The View, or as we affectionately call it, The Spew. And there I was, sitting next to Joy Behar on one side, and Whoopi Goldberg across from me, seething. And I learned a very important lesson, and I think it's one that conservative female foot soldiers have been embracing as well. And that is, you do not let yourself get steamrolled by women who have double-digit IQs. And if they give you an opening, you take it, you seize it, and do not shut up until they point the camera away from you and take away your money. So this is my strategy, and it's worked rather well. You can go look up the videos on YouTube to confirm that. These women do not have facts on their side. They do not have right on their side. They have nothing. And it's about time that we call them on it. And it's about time that we knit together a sorority of conservative female activists and warriors out there. And it is happening. And it is happening in large part because of amazing technological advances. The internet has been the conservative female activist's best friend. And the Tea Party movement, you'll notice, and this is not a coincidence, is led largely by stay-at-home and work-at-home moms. You know, those moms who don't work. This is why they're so afraid. Because social media is supposed to be the milieu and the jurisdiction of BarackObama.com. And it isn't anymore. And it shows you, I mean, it's always been a left-wing saying or canard that every voice counts. Hell yeah, every voice counts. We have voices too. And that is why they're trying so hard to stifle us, to demonize us, to marginalize us. Why do you think there is such rampant misogyny on the left? Because when they see women who are proud to be women, they can't stand it. And we're following in the footsteps of so many warriors, like Claire Booth, like Phyllis Schlafly, who have fought these wars before. Everything old is new again. You know, the idea that conservative women are not really women. People like Kay Bailey Hutchinson have been hearing that for 20, 25 years. Patricia Ireland, former president of NOW, said it. And we're female impersonators. We're just men with breasts. Not that I don't like mine. I wrote a column once, and this was during the whole Palin derangement syndrome outbreak 4 years ago, called The 4 Stages of Conservative Female Abuse. And I just went through every stage that they go through. And I know that the young conservative women on college campuses know all about this. You don't have to be big and famous and be on Fox News every day to have to deal with these leftist attacks. They say that you're brainwashed. Oh, you're just doing the white man's job. That's what I heard when I was at Oberlin. You're just a yellow woman doing a white man's job. You don't know what you're saying. You're just mouthing the man's agenda. I remember once I was at, just in the cafeteria at Oberlin, and I was minding my own business, because that's what conservatives like to do. And a feminist activist was trying to mind my business, because that's what they like to do. And I had used the word exploit. I think I was planning the next issue of our conservative publication. And I said, oh, we should exploit this opportunity. And this woman just barged into my conversation and said, exploit is a patriarchal word. Go away. I'm trying to run a business. Get out of my face. Everything that you are experiencing now on college campuses, and this is to the young ladies, you will see time and time again. It is going to serve you very well. I don't think that there is a better training ground for being a conservative female in public life than being on a liberal college campus. And, of course, this is not what they intend when we go there. I always say Oberlin backfired on me, but it worked really well. But I'm hoping that for my own daughter, that I can she can fast forward past all of that and We have to arm our young daughters, granddaughters, nieces, women out there. And we have to immunize them against the culture of entitlement and the culture of dependency and the culture of victimology that has become the trade of these liberal academic institutions. And I think it certainly helps that after Barack Obama is booted out of office in November, that eventually this entire liberal, tenured, radical racket on college campuses is going to burst. It is the next big bubble that will burst, finally. Hopefully in time for my generation of parents. But if not, we're well equipped enough to educate our kids and make sure that they have the values and the principles and the grounding to preserve the American dream. And I want to talk about the American dream for just a second. Because one of the things that's very important when you're combating the left is to be able to tell counter-narratives and to tell our stories. Barack Obama is so good at telling stories. And whenever he fails policy-wise, he always thinks the failure is that he hasn't told his fables well enough. And then he gets mad at the media because they're not telling his fables well enough for him. And I've always said that Republicans on Capitol Hill need to tell better stories. Look at the left. Look at Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. They're so good at surrounding themselves with these human shields. Right? When it was Obamacare, they dressed up the doctors in their lab coats. We're all for nationalizing healthcare and nationalizing ourselves out of business. Whether it's education policy, right? They'll get these teachers' union thugs to rustle up some indoctrinated kids and decorate their podiums and stages for all the press conferences. Where are our counter-narratives? I think that the Republicans have gotten slightly better at doing it. Do you remember when there was the Gibson guitar raid? And Obama was about to have another one of his State of the Union addresses. And the Republicans, and it was a woman, it was Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, who said, you know what? I'm going to invite the Gibson guitar CEO to come sit next to me, so that when the cameras pan to me, they're going to have to tell his story. And we need those human stories. And each and every one of us has that kind of story. When noxious elite femagogues like Hillary Rosen or Ariana Huffington go on these cable shows or sit next to that pig, Bill Maher, to trash conservative women, we need each and every one of you to get up and stand up in the public square and say, those people don't talk for me. They don't speak for me. They don't live on my planet. They assume that because we believe in free market principles, or that because we've achieved success in our lives, that we've had it handed to us on a silver platter. Oh no. Oh no. My parents grew up in a village outside of Manila in the Philippines called San Pablo City, and they lived in abject poverty. My mom washed her clothes in a creek. And when they came here, they had nothing. They knew nobody, but they had to learn English before they got here, and they had to have all their papers in place, and they had to scrape together money to pay the legal fees and all the fees that are required to come through the front door of this country. And they settled in a little town in South Jersey, Absecon, New Jersey, outside of Atlantic City. Tiny little town. At the time we moved there, there were about 2,500 people, and we were one of the few non-white families in the community. These people, these progressives of power, I call them, because they are the palest people on the planet a lot of time. Look at Keith Olbermann. Man, does that guy need to get to a tanning bed. I don't think he could afford it anymore. Power of the marketplace. How dare they play the race card against us, and particularly if you happen to be a conservative of color, like myself. I'm darker than Barack Obama. Don't call me racist. I know what it's like to be called a chink. I know what it's like to have my ethnic maiden name made fun of. And guess who made fun of my name, not just in kindergarten? That's right, Keith Olbermann. Okay, I had written a column several years ago questioning the Democrats on shady foreign donations. And he went on the air at the time he was on Misogyny NBC, MSNBC, and said, Michelle, mang-a-lang-a-lang-a-lang-a-lang. What am I in kindergarten again? And these people have a respectable place in the media elite. Well, not him anymore. Karma. You know he's the guy that called me a mashed up bag of meat with lipstick on it, right? Oh. I wear that as a badge of honor. Told my daughter about that. She said, what kind of meat? Steak. Raw. When I went off to college, I knew what overt, noxious racism was. But it was nothing compared to the condescending racism of the left. The kind where the smug administrators and faculty thought that they were doing you a favor by giving you race preferences and by assuming that you agreed with their identity politics. And I know that all of the young women who are on college campuses now know all about this because it hasn't changed since I was in college way too many years ago. Segregated dorms. I didn't ask to be put in Asia House. What am I doing in Asia House? I had nothing in common with fourth and fifth generation leftists from LA and San Francisco. But I looked like this, so I must want to be in Asia House. And they did the same thing for each. There was third world dorm, there was African heritage dorm. Separate graduations. I mean, all of these, the culture wars, the multiculturalism that had taken hold. And I was in college in the late 80s and early 90s. And one of the rites of passage for young conservatives on campus is when you bring a conservative speaker to your campus. And at the time, for me, it was Dinesh D'Souza. And he had just written Illiberal Education. And Oberlin had a big role in that book. So they were really riled up when we brought him to campus. And I've told this story many times, but I'll never forget it because it was at that moment that I realized my parents were pouring $40,000, $50,000 a year down the drain. He stood in Finney Chapel, and if you ever heard him speak or met him, he's just the most dapper, elegant, eloquent guy. And he was presenting the thesis of his book and talking about the negative consequences of affirmative action on minority students. And rather than hear him out, a big contingent of students of color stood up, students of stupidity and ignorance, and turned their backs on him the whole time he was speaking. And it was at that moment that I realized that I could not be a wallflower anymore. Because although I was a congenital conservative growing up, I had never really been an outspoken movement conservative. And I realized that if I didn't speak for me, these people would. And as I said, everything I learned on my college campus has played itself out in all the political debates we've seen. The exploitation of the race card, the intolerance, the incivility, the hypocrisy of the left. These are supposed to be institutions of higher learning. And yet, what they're inculcating in these generations of young people is the idea that when you're presented with ideas with which you disagree, the solution is mob violence, basically. I mean, how many times have we seen on these college campuses when conservative speakers, conservative female speakers in particular, have been degraded, have had things thrown at them? Everything from, God, I talked about this in Unhinged, salad dressing bottles, the University of Michigan, pies, Ann Coulter, shoes. Paul Wolfowitz is not a female speaker, but Paul Wolfowitz was speaking in the Pacific Northwest, and somebody threw a shoe at him. And yet, we're the ones who are suspects of domestic terrorism. There's a great picture on my website today. The subject of my latest column, of course, was this Hillary Rosen attack. And during a tea party a couple of years ago, there was a grandma who had a sign, and it said, "Right-wing domestic terrorist, stay-at-home mom." Right? Telling these stories is so important. And telling them well with a sense of humor and a smile on your face really kills them. Because it is their intention to paint each and every one of us as the most miserable people in the country. But you look at Debbie Wasserman Schultz and think, that is one unhappy woman. And no wonder, look at what she has to defend. I won't be happy either. One of the points that I made in my column today, and I think it's extremely important, and I'm trying to evangelize as much as possible, is the use of social networking and social media. And Twitter, I'm looking at Mary Beth Hicks because she's one of my closest Twitter friends, is to make our presence known in that space. And it's been really fun. I just started a new business up. I have a new website called twitchy.com because I'm twitchy. And I can never stop moving. And I think that we can't afford to be still and be static when so much is at stake. And Twitter is one of those places where this battleground between the leftist narrative setters and the rest of us, the real 99%, is taking place right now. You've got the White House, and they pay lots of people with our money to go into the social media space and spread tall tales about the Lilly Ledbetter Act and Obama's commitment to equal pay and gender equity, even though women in the White House make so much less money than their male counterparts. Shh, don't say that, don't say that. And the word is getting out there that there are ways to push back. I mean, radical egalitarianism is usually a bad thing. But on the online space, where you can talk directly to that poor schmuck Jay Carney, or Jim Messina, or whatever little trolls are running the Barack Obama and Michelle Obama account, it is very empowering. And you have grassroots conservative groups like Smart Girl Politics. You've got new media empires like, God bless him, the late Andrew Breitbart's empire, which is still out there and kicking. Dana Lash, one of my good friends, who is just a wonderful model of female conservative activism. This is very Reagan-esque, actually. the devolution of the conservative movement. Because for so long, it was based in D.C. No offense to those of you who live in D.C., I hate D.C. But you could be in D.C. but not of D.C. And you're seeing more and more of these conservative Tea Party moms, fiscal conservative leaders who have been born and bred and stayed out of the Beltway swamp. And that's how it should be. That is how the conservative movement is going to right itself with a lowercase r and a capital R. Because I saw it when I was there for upwards of a decade, and if I hadn't escaped, it might have happened to me, where you just lose touch. And it's not just Democrats that this happens to. I think that's part of the huge impetus for the Tea Party movement in the first place. We weren't just unhappy with Barack Obama. We were unhappy with the so-called GOP leadership that was capitulating far too often and compromising and enshrining this ridiculous idea that the goal of public policy and the goal of conservatism in Washington was bipartisanship. It killed us. We can't let that happen again. And so the devolution of the conservative movement, I think, is going to be our salvation. And I also think that with so much at stake, that there are many conservative women who realize that national politics isn't everything. And it's true that all politics really is local. And this whole battle over the war on women, the war on stay-at-home, work-at-home moms, is a part of that. It's not a surprise to me that a lot of people in the Beltway don't get it. And so even today, there were some people who were supposed to be on the right side of the aisle joining people like Hillary Rosen, looking down their noses at conservative moms who were infuriated, saying that it was faux outrage, that it's all fake, that it's manufactured. No, the only thing that's manufactured is Sandra Fluke. Somebody who was groomed with the explicit intention to try and make the Republican Party and the conservative movement look anti-woman. There are women across this country who have made choices. I don't call it sacrifices. It's the thing. It grates my ears when I hear the likes of Hillary Rosen saying, with her sanctimonious voice, that if you're a stay-at-home mom, you've had to make sacrifices. No, actually, it's a lot of these extreme feminists who've put their careers before their children, who are imposing sacrifices. And it's their kids and their spouses who are sacrificing for other goals. Everybody's mileage varies. Everybody's going to try and do their best when they're a young woman to decide what the proper balance is between their career and their family. But let's not pretend that there are no trade-offs when you make these choices. And I think that's what's most important. I think when we're talking about the next generation of young conservative leaders, that it's very important that you decide what your priorities are and that you stick to them and that you don't spend the rest of your life in the public square rationalizing those choices and using your position as a woman in public life to impose it on other people. It's not a gender thing. It's a freedom thing. And those people do not respect the free will that conservative women exercise when they make choices that these women don't like because it reflects badly on them. And I think there are several battles that are going on here. Obviously, on the political battleground and the economic battleground, but there are also culture wars as well. And I think in an election season where it's being driven home that we need to always constantly be talking about the economy and jobs, that our role as upholders of traditional values is getting subsumed, and that we're supposed to be quiet about that. But among the fiercest warriors for the conservative movement have been the women out there who have fought for the pro-life movement. And the young women especially on the college campuses, in social media, who are among the most innovative and bravest women. I'm thinking about young women like Lila Rose and Live Action and groups like that that are going undercover, that are essentially risking their lives and livelihoods by exposing how the abortion racket is the most anti-woman, misogynist, deadly force in this country. To use a card that's always played against us, and in this case it's not a card, it's real, racist. I wrote a column a couple of months ago trying to explain to clueless feminists the eugenic roots of the abortion movement. And you know what? Rather than say, you've made it up, you're just a rabid right-winger, I got a lot of emails from young liberals who said, I never knew that. There's a phrase that stuck out at me, and it's the title I used for the column, from Margaret Sanger in a letter that she wrote to one of her cohorts, murderous cohorts. And the phrase was, to stop the multiplication of the unfit. Tell those stories. And there are so many brave women who have gone through the ordeal of having an abortion, who had no idea that they were pawns and victims in this larger ideological war, who are finally waking up. So when these Republican strategists in the Beltway lecture the rest of us about the need to do more outreach and diversify the party, PowerPoint presentations, that is not how you're going to persuade people and win them over. You've got to grab them, and you've got to go into their space. And you have to tell true life tales, sometimes horror stories, usually uplifting and redeeming stories as well. And I think that ultimately, of course, it should be very easy to sell conservatism because it is about freedom. We have to grab the word choice back from people who are trying to take real individual choices away. And I think that's true culturally, socially, and then of course the other great important battlefield. It's not just at the college level, but from the very beginning with education. I always like to say that every parent is a homeschooler in our own way, because the home is the most important school you have. And the family is the most important community that we need to organize. Parents are unpaid community organizers. And the monopoly of the state on our public education system, of course, has gotten us into the mess that we're in now. They're historically illiterate. They're economically illiterate. Oh, I have to tell you this story. So I was on Twitter, because I'm always on Twitter. When I'm in the carpool line at school. Yeah, that's right. In the grocery aisles. And in my column today, I shot back at Hillary Rosen for arguing that Ann Romney had no place to talk about economics and she had never worked a day outside the home. And I had said that President Obama had never met a payroll, and yet he gets to mouth off and dictate what every small business and business owner should do or not do. And I got a tweet from someone who called themselves a UC Berkeley graduate, and she said, a lifelong learner. She also identified herself as a tutor. And as a rejoinder to my statement that President Obama had never been a payroll, she said, well, he was an attorney and a professor. What about that? This woman thought that collecting a paycheck meant meeting a payroll. I would say that if Berkeley heard that they'd want their degree back. But they're probably responsible for that in the first place. No offense to Berkeley, which is where my husband grew up. You can be converted. He was my first convert. Make the effort. The last little bit I'll go off on here is, and then I'd love to take questions because that's my favorite part, is to tell you to read Culture of Corruption if you haven't already. Because I spotlight, and I think this is very relevant in this context of the war on women, to spotlight the radical women of the Obama administration and how poorly they have served us, all of us. You had the likes of Carol Browner, who was the former environmental czar in the White House, somebody who was already a known corruptocrat. She had been chastised by a federal judge when she worked for the Clinton administration for obstructing the disclosure of public documents. And she was specifically chastised for what a federal judge called contumacious conduct. Bad public official. And yet, she was allowed to serve for so long in the Obama administration where she oversaw fraud. Ken Salazar, the Interior Secretary, who I call the loathsome cowboy, we know all about him in Colorado, and Carol Browner conspired to doctor the scientific report that was used as justification for the drilling moratorium. Several courts took them to task for lying about the underlying scientific foundation for that drilling ban. And they've gotten away with it. And although she stepped down late last year, Ken Salazar is still there, and Carol Browner has enormous influence along with her lobbyist husband. Women in skirts can be just as corrupt as the old boy network. And this message has to get across as well. Kathleen Sebelius. I love it when you know what I'm talking about. Not only did she join hands with big labor goons in demonizing the Tea Party activists who organized the great healthcare town hall protests of a couple of years ago. This woman is also still involved in active litigation in Kansas, where she allegedly oversaw the destruction of documents in an investigation about Planned Parenthood and its role in covering up for sexual offenders who brought in their victims and forced them to get abortions. Why isn't this in the news? Talk about it. Tell your friends and your coworkers and your neighbors and your deluded liberal relatives. Not that I know any. Get it out there. Get the message out there on your college campuses. These are not friends of women. These are our enemies. Calling things what they are. Calling these people out. There are too many people in Washington who won't do these things, and that's why you have to do it. And that's why we gather in places like this, and that's why I'm so thankful for the Clear Use Policy Institute. I've met so many incredible young women in my travels across the country at speaking on campuses. And ultimately, that's what gives me the most hope. You know, you've got all these chin pullers in D.C., it's a lost cause. Well, maybe California's a lost cause. But it's not. As long as we're doing what so many of these feminists are not, procreating, hopefully we'll gain some sort of demographic advantage. We do it with good cheer. Oh, I'm going to botch the fake Latin, but I always have veterans write to me, and there's this sort of fake Latin phrase for "don't let the bastards get you down." Non illegitimi carbon. Thank you. Oh, my Latin teacher's going to kill me. Don't let the bastards get you down. Keep doing what you're doing, and I would love to take your questions. Thank you so much. All right. Oh, yeah.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for everything you do. I appreciate it. My question is, how do we continue momentum? I was very disheartened by, for example, Matt Lewis's column in the Daily Caller today, where he basically stepped on the incredible response to Hillary Rosen's outburst the other day. And in a position for a conservative paper such as that, and to come out and editorialize and call all of us, the faux outrage kind of thing, and don't play the victim, don't play identity politics, basically saying stand down. So, I mean, how do we respond to people on our side?
Yeah.
Right? The Matt Lewises who are telling us that we're barking up the wrong tree, things like this.
You double down. And this is in part why I founded Twitchy.com. I think the more, of course, the more the merrier. I mean, it upholds free market values to have more diversity. And I think that you have to take note. And I warned about this yesterday. I said, pay attention to the people who call your outrage fake. And it's not a coincidence that, I mean, I don't know Matt Lewis. I see him posting on my other site that I founded several years ago, hotair.com. And people like that do not have a constituency. And so it's, you want to talk about faux, that's faux influence. Because if you establish a beachhead like that, like the Daily Caller, the raison d'etre was supposed to be, they were supposed to be an alternative to the Huffington Post. And yet they're echoing the same sentiment that was published in the Huffington Post. What is that all about? And I think what you saw was massive pushback to what Matt Lewis was saying. And it underscores what I'm saying about how every voice counts. Because if you have one inside the Beltway pundit going along with the left-wing line that grassroots conservative moms don't have anything to be offended by, one of those met with thousands of stay-at-home moms who doesn't take that long to type out 140 characters. Like I said, I consider that a victory because he was the one that marginalized himself in that. I also think that, as painful as it might be, that when your purported friends are dissing you, you don't just sit there and take it. Because you can't ignore false narratives. The way that you win is to destroy false narratives and to replace them with the truth. About a week ago, I had to do something that was rather uncomfortable. I had to call out Ann Coulter for disparaging Sarah Palin as a quote-unquote novelty candidate. Now, I understand that everyone, not everyone shares the same view of Sarah Palin, but this is one of the women that conservative women should be proudest of. A mother, a grandmother, someone with far more executive experience than the executive in the White House, and a woman who has taken more slings and arrows for the conservative movement than any other living conservative woman. And Ann Coulter took Bill Maher's side. And once again, I think you have to take note of where people stand in these fundamental battles and keep score. You can read the post that I wrote. I think that she is genuinely affectionate towards people that are hostile to the conservative movement. And while that may be a good way to survive in places like DC or Hollywood, it's not the way that most conservative women live. Wow. Yeah.
This may be a question that you get often, but I was wondering where basically your conservative values came from and also your leadership, and I guess most of the things that you're doing now, just where did that base come from?
My parents. From the time I was old enough to understand, and I think this is probably, very common experience among first and second generation Americans, that it is ground into you just what a privilege it is to be in this country. It is a privilege, not some sort of entitlement. And my parents were great admirers of Ronald Reagan, but they were never politically active. So that's why I say congenital conservative, because I started out as a social conservative first. My parents were very devout Catholics. And so I had the traditional values part of me when I went to Oberlin. And I didn't initially go to Oberlin for academics. I went there because they have a conservatory of music, and my mom really, 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 really hoped that I was going to be a classical pianist. So I mollified her for about a semester, and then I nearly flunked out of music theory. I thought I better try something else. And then that's when I became nuclearized. Was at Oberlin, and I think throughout my life, conservatism has always worked for me. And as I traveled from newspaper to newspaper and saw just how homogenous and blinded most of my colleagues were, I guess I got bolder. I didn't always start out as mouthy as I am. And I've probably told this to some of the gals before, that I was really paralyzingly shy in elementary school. I flunked a speech class in 6th grade because we were supposed to write about anything. And it was the year that the plane crashed into the Potomac River, and Ronald Reagan had honored the very first citizen who sat in the box at the State of the Union address, a guy named Lenny Skutnik. He was a government worker, and he dove into the icy Potomac to save many people. And that's when Reagan had his great line about heroism being ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So I had written this great speech about heroism and Lenny Skutnik, and I got up in front of the class and I looked at all the eyes looking back at me, and my hands went like this and the papers went on the floor, and I ran out the door. And I got an F. And I got home and I was despondent, and I thought my mom was going to, dry my tears and comfort me, and she said, "You got what you deserved." She was a tiger mom before tiger mom. So you learn to grow a thick skin, and that was her constant lesson to me, was take responsibility for your action or your inaction. So that gave me a great set of survival skills. My mom was boot camp all the way up till I was 18. And then I mentioned that there was this sort of pivotal moment in my college career when I was either just going to go along and get along or stick my neck out. And I was saying at the table here that campuses are great laboratories for building female superwomen. You grow a really thick skin, and you get used to being called all of these names that we hear now. So Keith Olbermann is like, and then I think, of course, being a mother, the next stage. And I always just sort of weaving these two things together about, my own story and being conservative. I got to embed with an Army unit in 2007. And it was the first time that I had ever traveled to the Middle East. And we had to transit through Kuwait. And so I was traveling with a male colleague. I was the boss, he was my cameraman, because we did little independent videos on our Army base. And when we were going through Kuwait, of course, even though it's one of the more moderate or liberal of Middle East countries and fairly pro-American, they still have a lot of Sharia law dictates. And we had wanted to stay in a hotel the night before we were flying out to Baghdad. And we wanted to share a room because I was trying to save costs, and they wouldn't let us. And it wasn't just that we were not married; it was because I was brown. And when I handed over the credit card, they were very confused because it was the brown woman giving them a credit card. And on our way back to the U.S., I was stopped. There was a lot of Filipino workers in the Middle East. A lot of them are domestics, servants, service people. And there was a young Filipino woman in the bathroom, and I looked like a mess. My pants hadn't been washed in like 8 days. It's not like they have washing machines on base. And she asked if I was, with the military. I said no. She said, well, what are you doing? I said, I'm a journalist. Oh my God, you're a journalist? Yeah. Are you American? Yes. Did you marry someone to get there? And she said, you're so lucky. And it just hits you. It's just a huge reminder of what I might have been if my parents weren't as fortunate as they were to get into this country. And so it always amuses me when vile misogynists of the left turn around, and this isn't unhinged, and it's happened ever as long as I've been in public life, when people on the left call me a barmaid. Or use the word that Senator Fluke got a presidential call from. I hear that every day. I get it in my email every day. Or on Twitter every day. You're a barmaid. Didn't I see you in Korea? Didn't I see you in Subic Bay? That's the stereotype they have. And yet, it's really powerful because I might have been that, if not for my parents' ability to achieve the American dream. This gives you inoculation. It gives you a huge sense of empowerment when they come at you with the sexist and the racist. And so my own kids know what a joke it is when the left uses those words. And that's very empowering, too. I'll tell my daughter or my son to clean their room, and they'll come back and say, "You're racist." My daughter came up with this new term because we were talking about racism, sexism, and she turned around and she told her brother, when he wouldn't share his slinky, "You're race-sexist! Race-sexist!" I think there's a book there. And Margie's smiling. Long answer. How about one more?
At what point did the left start really threatening or attacking you?
Almost from the first year that I was in newspaper journalism. I worked for the Los Angeles Daily News, and one of my old nemesis, Maxine Waters, was running her mouth about something or other. And I ventured out to South Central Los Angeles, where there was a job training center the taxpayers were subsidizing. It's called the Maxine Waters Job Training Center. And I wanted to see what kind of jobs they were training people to hold. And I had gotten a tip, and it was a mess. It was disgusting, and the bathrooms were gross. And the only people that were congregating around the job training center were gang members. And so I wrote a column about it, and my poor editor, got an earful from her office. And I got a flood of hate mail calling me all sorts of names, basically accusing me of being a white supremacist, me. And we've been on each other's cases ever since then. And I think it's a travesty that after 1992, 20 years, that she is still in office. Talk about the culture of corruption. You could just do a whole book on her. I better stop saying this in front of my publisher. As you might recall, she was charged 2 summers ago with corruption related to her carrying water for this minority bank that got millions of dollars in TARP money as a result of her intervention. And they still haven't had that trial. Another story that needs to be told every time she parades around in front of the cameras going after banks and marching with the occupiers. To be continued. I think we're doing a book signing or like signed hands or foreheads or whatever. Calendars. And I just want to thank you all again for coming out. I really appreciate it.